Hi guys, it's me George, and today I wanted to do a video that may come across as a little bit of a rant. It's not the first time I've spoken about this subject, but I do feel incredibly passionate about this because I do think that it is something I've seen amongst the years with so many people, so many people concerning the folkloric and traditional witchcraft community. And that is relying solely on academia as a basis for their practice. Now, I want to say first and foremost that I am not throwing academics in the bin. I'm not throwing academia away. I think that as an author, I think academia is extremely resourceful and it's extremely useful, and it definitely can add to a practice. It can help inspire an individual to adapt older workings to the now. And ultimately, traditional witchcraft wouldn't be what it is without that academia there. So I am in no way, shape, or form discrediting academia or academics. I realise that academics put in years and years of discipline and determination and study into their sources, into references, into just becoming who they are. So I want to make the disclaimer that I am in no way, shape, or form discrediting academics, because I see knowledge as powerful and I think that is extremely powerful. And I think that it is extremely potent and it can add to a practice. What I am saying here is I think that as humans, ultimately, we tend to be either one extreme or the other. And sometimes I think it's about finding a midway point. It's about finding a balance for us personally when it comes to our own modern day praxis. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I've seen so many people just strip back and pull back all different various aspects of their practice that actually add to their practice, that actually contribute to their practice. And they're like, no, they wouldn't do this back then, and no, they wouldn't do this. No, that's not how it went back then. We'll pull that away. We'll fuck that in the bin over there. um, my question is, how much do you strip away? And if you keep stripping away, what are you left with? Because when it comes to modern day practice, we have access to things that a cunning man in this early modern period wouldn't have had access to. As modern day practitioners, we have access to things that they just really wouldn't have had access to at all. And yes, they might not have done that in the past. Practitioners might not have done that in the past, but you are not a practitioner of the past. You are a practitioner of the now. And I think that that is so important when we talk about this. I think that this is something that ultimately we need to be mindful of and we need to remember. Of course, a large part of my practice is from academia, is from study. So I am not in any way, shape, or form dismissing that, because I really want to make that clear. Because as mentioned, I think as humans, our minds can go to one extreme or the other, and this is not that video. It's about finding a balance. I am not discrediting academics like Owen Davies, Emma Wilby, Professor Ronald Hutton. I am not doing that. I have the utmost respect for them, and I have the utmost respect for academics. Now, there will be some academics that are also witches, some mentioned previously, but one of the things I want to say is that, ultimately, when it comes to academics, the majority of the time, academics that are telling us this information from the early modern period in regards to cunningcraft practice, in regards to wise women, in regards to witchcraft, they aren't witches. They are historians, they are academics. And so a historian and a witch are two very different things. Well, more than witchcraft, rather, let me readjust my words. Don't know what that hand thing is, but witchcraft and an academic historian, very different things. Academia is very factual, but it is also very dry. A lot of academic texts can sometimes be a bit boring. I'll be the first to admit that. Not all academic texts, but they can be very, very dry, very factual, very methodical in their approach, which is absolutely fine. But witchcraft is not academia. And we need to stop allowing academics to dictate our practice. And by saying this, I'm not saying academics dictate our practice. Witches and practitioners allowing academia, what the academics have wrote, to fully dictate their practice, to fully take it over, to fully have the whole influence on their whole practice. And I think that that is something that can be quite damaging, because I don't think that, first of all, I think academics are humans. We are human, we make mistakes. Academics can be wrong. There are some things that academics say that I disagree with. I completely and utterly disagree with. And there are some things that academics say, some academics say that I agree with. Most of it I do agree with, but there are some things they say that I just do not agree with. I'm like, no. For instance, and this is a whole separate video, the idea that witches didn't exist. A large amount of academics say that, not all, but a large amount of academics say that, because ultimately academics are individuals. They are humans. And have different thoughts and different patterns and different opinions. But a large majority will say that witches did not exist in the early modern period. And I do not buy that. I don't buy that. I think that in a time where food was scarce, where disease such as malaria, such as polio, such as smallpox was creeping around every corner, in such a hostile world where, fueled by superstition and by folklore, you can bet your bottom dollar that someone tried. You can bet, if someone heard through oral law, Bessie Dunlop down the road put one hand on her head and one hand at the bottom of a hill and pledged all to the devil, and he told her that she would neither want nor need for food or the clothes on her back ever again. Someone that is literally starving, that has children, that is desperate, will try that, will actually try that. And I think, given in the early modern period, the population of the UK, I definitely think someone tried that, and I definitely believe that there were witches there practicing. I don't think it was a coven thing. I don't think they met up in secret society and met up on the top of the hill and stuff like that. I think it was singular ecstatic experiences that these people were having and were experiencing. And I genuinely believe that. Some people can talk about ergo poisoning. I think that also played a part in it, but I also think that played a part in it in terms of a witch having a out-of-body and hallucinatory experience, which would be no different from taking other psychedelics and entheogens in order to facilitate fetch flight. So I believe that witches did exist, but I think that's a whole entirely different video. I think we need to look at the aspects of it, and we need to look at the actual the actual practices of what people done, and what people do when it comes to academia, to witchcraft. Normally, academia is dry. It is very dry. It is very factual. It's very down to the point. Witchcraft is very different. Witchcraft is very feral. Witchcraft is very primal. It's raw. It's feral. It's untamed. It's wild. It is an ecstatic, spirit-led tradition that goes through inspiration by the spirits, that when we are doing workings as witches, sometimes a bottle of well water can fall down. And I fully believe that that is the spirits guiding a person within their magical operations. And so for me, for instance, such as not using candles, because in certain points in the early modern period, cunning folk wouldn't have used candles. They didn't exist. for people that were that poor, that hand to mouth, for a rural cunning man, or they didn't have access to them. But we do now. And, for me, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with the fact that most cunning men and wise women wouldn't have had candles or access to candles. But in certain time periods, like the early 19th century, they did. And they, would utilize that and adapt to that. And this is my point. Magic and the practice of magic, in particular folk magic, it adapts, it moves with the times, and it has to. If it doesn't move with the times, it stops being a living tradition, because being living is being in the now, it's being in the here, it's being in the present. Of course, academia is useful. Of course, academia is extremely valuable and has contributed to a large amount of what we have today in terms of traditional folkloric witchcraft and folk magical practices, of course, without a shadow of a doubt. But don't actively and automatically think that anything that isn't academia is void, it's not useful, it's not worthy. Don't think that, because that's not the case. As mentioned, witchcraft is very nourishing, it's very enriching, it's a very spirit-led, ecstatic and colourful tradition. It's not dry, it's not factual. There are truths in witchcraft, there are poetic truths in witchcraft that might not be physically true, but there will be a poetry to it that is true. And this is what I'm trying to say, is that I think we have got into a bit of a nasty habit where we are allowing academics to dictate through their research and through their amazing, years worth of well-researched information. We are allowing that to fully dictate our practice. And I don't think that is entirely healthy, because I think as witches, I think we are wild, we are feral, we are free, and we don't allow other people to confine us into these boxes in our society. And we see that quite a lot. So why allow someone to confine your practice into a box? That is my question. I think that when it comes down to it, really and truly, witchcraft is not academia. It's not, and they are two very separate things. And again, I'm not chucking academia or academics in the skip or in the bin and saying, oh, that's all, I'm not doing that. I'm trying to find more of a balance here. Because I do think that these accounts, these lore, this history that we have, that was because people were spirit-led. That was because people were inspired. That was because people were in an ecstatic trance and an ecstatic state. That was because of what witchcraft is. These people at the time were doing things that were wild, that were untamed, that were not of society, that were not deemed as acceptable, that were other, that were different, that were of the other world. And I think sometimes that's what we need to be mindful of. Now, that is no disrespect to anyone that incorporates academia within their practice. It's not. I'm not trying to slate them down, but what I'm trying to say is just try and find a midway point and a balance, because I think when you pull away and strip away and pull back everything, what do you have left? What do you actually have left to base off a valid, nourishing, enriching spiritual practice if you've pulled everything back, if you've chucked everything away because that wasn't stated in the academic text? And I have seen many groups of people do that, and I just think that is something we need to be careful of. I really do. Now, again, as an author, that is, academia is something that is so resourceful to me and useful to me, so I'm not going to slate that down. And this is a shameless plug as well, but I'm just going to do it. If anybody is interested in folk magic, in British folk magic as a modern day praxis, as keeping in with the times, as moving it within the current contemporary climate, then my second edition Barbarous Words A compendium of conjurations, British folk magic, and other popish charms is available on Amazon. And a lot of people have actually said, when, you know, is this book actually, you know, is it the first edition I'm buying? If I go to Barbarous Words, I'm really scared I'm going to order the first edition. The first edition does not exist anymore, so automatically when you buy Barbarous Words, you just automatically get the second edition. The first edition no longer exists, guys, so it's been, you know, edited and then saved over. It no longer exists. Only on Kindle, actually, but in paperback, it's the second edition. So if anybody is interested in applying academic research, but then fitting it in a modern day practice, without too many confines, without being boxed in too much, then yeah, this is my book, Barbarous Words. It's available on Amazon, and it speaks about exactly that in terms of making folk magic living, making it in the now. So yes, shameless plug at the end of the video, but do you know what? I'm going to be honest, why not? Why not? If anyone's interested, it's available on Amazon. But yes, it was a bit of a rant, this video, but it is something I think is super, super important. So yeah, over and out, and peace.